Good afternoon, Federation family. Welcome to our detailed training session for the 2021 Washington Seminar. I'm thrilled to have everybody here at this meeting. We're going to go through all the issues. We're going to do some mock meetings. We're going to talk about some logistics. We're going to talk about, we have a great etiquette presentation. Many of the things we would normally do in person at our 2 to 4 training, I'll call it, leading up to the Great Gathering In, which will be featured starting at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. You certainly won't want to miss the Great Gathering In. President Riccobono has a lot of fantastic content planned for that. But before we get to the Great Gathering In, we're going to go through some detailed, more detailed aspects of preparation for this year's Washington Seminar. All right, let's start beginning with the issues. All of our issues this year deal with accessibility, some aspect of accessibility. First, we want to put more access technology in the hands of blind people. The Access Technology Affordability Act will help do that. Next, we want to try to make sure that life-saving home-based medical equipment is available. The medical devices non-visual accessibility will help with that. Next, we want to make sure that the websites, whether educational, employment, health-related, transportation-related, everything we do, our everyday lives are so centered now around mobile apps and website accessibility, and we want to make sure those are accessibility. The 21st Century Mobile Apps and Website Accessibility Act, will help deal with that. And last, we want to make sure that we can preserve the sacred right of voting here in our country, and the Americans with Disabilities Voting Rights Act will help with that. So we're going to talk about each of those 4 issues in just a few minutes, and along with various logistical things. I want to talk a little bit about what I'll call sort of the perfect meeting as you're preparing, your group's preparing for your meetings that are coming up this week. There's some things you can do to help make the meetings go more smoothly. First of all, be sure to designate an overall person to lead the meeting. From our point of view, from the National Federation of the Blind, you should have a group leader. That leader could present some of the issues or not. It's really up to your individual group. The first thing that the group leader should do is introduce and review the speakers and a little bit about the National Federation of the Blind. I might say that the National Federation of the Blind is the premier membership and civil rights organization for blind people in America. And it's the lead premier civil rights and membership organization for people in your specific state. And talk a little bit about that. You might talk about our 1-minute message. Remind them that the National Federation of the Blind knows that blindness is not the characteristic that defines you or your future. Every day, we raise the expectations of blind people because low expectations create obstacles between blind people and our dreams. You can live the life you want. That's always a good way to start the meeting. And just recite the 1-minute message. So powerful. All right. And then you might mention that the folks are blind. It's not going to be quite as obvious on a Zoom call. So talk about the fact that we are blind people, that of is the most important word in our name, National Federation of the Blind, and that we're constituents in that the state level or the district level. And then maybe connect a little bit on that. So after you've gone through those sort of introductory remarks, you'll want to go through the 3 issues. When you're doing the 4 issues. When you're doing the 4 issues, you'll want to be sure to really cast them first as, what's the overall problem? What are we trying to solve? Maybe we're trying to get more access technology in the hands of blind people because access technology is so expensive. So kind of explain that. Jeff's going to talk about that soon. Then you should give a personal story. It's really helpful if you describe how that problem has specifically impacted you, either through your own personal story or by telling someone else's personal story. So you sort of give the big picture of the problem, followed by a very specific instance, preferably your own story, again, or that of someone you know, but name names. Talk about how my name is John Perret, and I specifically am a constituent, and I'm having problem with this, and I could use your help. I could use your help by passing this legislation and tie that all together. And then say, in fact, the best way to solve this problem would be through the enactment of federal legislation. Problem, individual story, the solution is federal legislation. Then the member knows, oh, you're here at the right place. That's what they do. All right. And then you should try to describe, well, here's exactly what the legislation, what we're hoping it would do, and describe that in some detail. And then you should also study the fact sheets and the FAQs that we have on the website, because that will help you with questions you might get. You don't necessarily have to bring up every detail in your presentation, but be prepared for some questions. So if they ask, well, exactly would it cover this? How would it do that? Then you'll be able to answer those questions. In the event, now you don't have to know the answer to every question. That's not a problem. If they ask you a question, don't guess. If you're not sure, say you'll be more than happy to get back to them. And either you do that, or certainly let us know here at the National Center, and we'll help you research and get an answer back to them. I next want to mention the the last thing would be what I'll call the 4 Ps. This is, the first one is, these are the 4 characteristics that we do in everything we do that helps makes us so successful in these meetings, but all of our advocacy that we do all year long. The first is polite. It's really helpful to be polite. This is classic, this please, thank you, and other respect. So to the entire meeting and everything you do when it comes to this advocacy, maintain an element of politeness. It really gets you more than you think. Next, professional. All right, and these are formal meetings. And when you're doing emails or the meetings, try to keep at a formal professional level. That will go a long way. So this polite, professional. Next, persuasive. We have in our fact sheets, and hopefully through your practice, we've tried to come up with a lot of good arguments and a lot of good techniques and ways to persuade people about why this really is the systemic problems that we do have and why this is the best solution. So it's very helpful to try to be very persuasive. And last, be persistent. Don't believe that just because I said we're going to be polite, we're not going to be persistent. We're going to be both at the same time. We're not giving up till this legislation gets passed. This legislation will dramatically improve the lives of blind people in America. We know it. We're certain of it. And we're going to keep working till it gets done. But I'm hoping we get it done a whole lot sooner than later. I think we're positioned to do very well in the 117th Congress. And you're going to hear more about why we think that. And it's because, well, and partly it's because of you. The last part is, you can imagine if all of us worked together in all 535 meetings, all saying the same thing, all tying it back as constituents, all being persuasive, all being polite and professional, all being persistent, that by working together, we can help influence each individual member of Congress. And by that teamwork, by working together with a single unified message, that's what's going to help move our 4 legislative issues forward. So I look forward to talking to you more about that over the next 2 hours. And so let's go, before we get into the issues, there are a number of logistical things, some of them new because of the Zoom and the virtual, that I want to make sure you're aware of. So let's go through a number of logistical things, and then we'll come back and do a review of the issues. So here to talk about various issues, logistics, is Kyle.
Thank you, John. So I want to just kind of talk a little bit about the portal first and foremost. When you are entering the Zoom information into the portal, just make sure you have either the Zoom link or the meeting ID and the passcode. If the member of Congress's office doesn't want to use Zoom, or if they want to use a conference line, that's fine. There's no specific format for what needs to go in that field. It just is required that there is something in the field. On that note, also please make sure that the National Federation of the Blind point of contact name and phone number is in the appointment information. So this is going to be whoever we would need to get in contact with if we wanted to potentially come to a specific meeting. Please make sure the information in the portal is kept up to date. So if you have a member of Congress or their office call you and say that they can't do a specific date or time, make sure you update that in the portal so that we know what date and time we need to be there, or if for some strange reason the Zoom link changes, please update that as well. In the portal now, as we mentioned last week, the cheat sheets are available. So these are the one-page notes that you would get. Typically, we would hand them out in Suite 275, but these are the notes that you'll get that have, there's one page for each member of Congress, and those have the co-sponsor or sponsor history for all of our legislation, as well as whether this member of Congress is on any relevant committees. The relevant committees for this year for the Access Technology Affordability Act, it is in the House, the Ways and Means Committee. In the Senate, it is the Finance Committee. For the Medical Device Non-Visual Accessibility Act, it is the Energy and Commerce Committee in the House, and the HELP Committee, or the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee in the Senate. For the 21st Century Mobile Apps and Websites Accessibility Act, that in the House is the Energy and Commerce Committee again, and the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee in the Senate. And for the Americans with Disabilities Voting Rights Act, in the House, that is the House Committee on House Administration, and in the Senate, it is the Senate Rules and Administration Committee. If you have any problems at all with the portal, go ahead and send an email to hillappointments@nfb.org or call 410-659-9314, extension 2230. That again is hillappointments@nfb.org or 410-659-9314, extension 2230. Now to get into the actual meetings. This year we are going to encourage you to turn on your video. This is going to help create a more of a face-to-face or in-person experience for the members of Congress and their staff. To that end, please make sure you wear professional attire. We're not asking for a full suit, but put on a clean collared shirt, make sure your hair is brushed or combed. Just make sure you look pretty good for the members of Congress. Also, please be aware of your background. So if you could get a plain wall or door, that'd be perfect. If that's not an option, maybe a bookcase, or if you have some art or maybe a family portrait in your house, you could have that as your background. And this is just going to be behind you as you're speaking on the Zoom call. If you are not speaking, please stay muted. We don't want to have a whole lot of pets making noise in the background, or maybe your children playing or anything like that. So we want these to be good, professional, persuasive meetings, as John says. Study the fact sheets, know the issues. This year, we have 4 issues. All 4 of our fact sheets are available on the website in HTML, Word, BRF, and audio files, so you don't really have any excuse for not knowing these issues. Those are available at nfb.org/Washington-seminar. When you are finished with the meeting, please remember to log back into the portal and enter the rating for the appointment. So the 4 options for this year, as they are every year, are yes if the office was supportive of the issue, no if they were not supportive of the issue, undecided if they wanted to do a little more research, or not discussed if for some reason you just didn't get around to it or didn't have the time, the meeting got cut short or anything like that. To go over the meetings, we are going to have 3 legislative debrief sessions this year. So that will be tomorrow night, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. And the Zoom information for these is on the agenda, which is available at nfb.org/Washington seminar. And these are just to go over the meetings, to answer any questions you might be getting about the issues from the offices, or to address any feedback you're getting. So this is to kind of help you better prepare for the next day's meetings. Almost done here. So again, going back to the Washington seminar page, as I mentioned, you can find the fact sheets there in HTML, Word, Braille, and audio. And this is for all 4 issues. And you can also find FAQ sheets for each of the 4 issues. Those are available in HTML and Word. You can find the full agenda for the Washington seminar. So that'll have all of the Zoom information and Zoom links and things like that in there. And you can find an audio recording of a sample meeting. So this would be how we would ideally like the meetings to go. And last here, we have put together a virtual packet that you can find at nfb.org/Washington-seminar-packet. That's PACKET. This is to replace the physical folder that we would hand out, or that we would have you hand out to each member of Congress. So this contains the 4 fact sheets, a link to the scholarship page, a link to the About Us page for the National Federation of the Blind, and a link to the NFB Newsline page. So again, that's kind of everything that we would have put in a physical folder, but since we don't have physical folders this year, we have a electric folder. And that's all I have. So thank you, John.
All right, fantastic. Thanks, Kyle. All right, so we want to maybe just one thing. So as far as dress, if you do want to wear a suit, Kyle wasn't necessarily discouraging that. So let's just say that that's part of the whole profession, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Now, we do have a few announcements, so I want to go to Beth with some other announcements, please.
Good afternoon. We've had a request for the link to get to the Spanish interpretation, and that's actually a separate Zoom room. And you would use the meeting ID 978-114-68278. And we've put that in the chat, and I'll put it in the chat again in just a moment. Also, the link for captioning is https://ns.onecapapp.com/event/NFB. And I will put that in the chat also in just a minute. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Beth. All right. And the, excuse me. So one of the things that I think is so exciting is that we even had this virtual packet. It's something that you can direct members of Congress to that Kyle described. It has the 4 fact sheets with other brochures. So that's something that you're welcome to look at, and you can direct members of Congress either before, during, or after the meeting, maybe not during the meeting, but before or after the meeting, along with all the other material that's on the website. So, and if you have questions about the portal, for those of you who are actually entering meetings and other things, please continue to work with Kyle. We really appreciate all the folks that have entered their meetings already. There are hundreds of them. Very exciting, very much what I was talking about. The teamwork of the National Federation of the Blind is clearly on display. All right, so here to even give more detail about various aspects of etiquette, our own Ms. Hoozit. We're going to go to Catherine Webster.
Awesome. Thanks, John, and thank you for having me. I am super excited to go a little deeper into the 4 Ps that John mentioned earlier this afternoon. I'm going to break my piece up into Zoom facilitation and then just overall facilitation tactics. So these are some tips and tricks that I think are super helpful and important as we're presenting in general, but also particularly when we're talking to Congress. So as Kyle mentioned, appearance matters. That means dress matters, particularly from the waist up. Making sure that your camera is positioned correctly. And my rule of thumb is that if I'm at a normal desk height, that I put either a textbook or something under my laptop to prop it up a little bit, and that I slant my laptop not at a right angle, but even like 2 to 3 inches or 2 inches back from that to allow for your face to be centered. Try whether it's using, Ira, Be My Eyes, a friend, a colleague, whatever it is, to make sure that the congressman or woman isn't staring at your forehead and that you're centered. Being able to see your face and your body and your movements is really important. To that point, dressing comfortably, since you're going to be sitting in the same position for a while working on these meetings, is important to make sure that your posture is shoulders back, chin up, smiling as much as we possibly can, and having our head lifted towards the camera and not necessarily with our head position looking down at our lap, but being as much, and I'm doing this as I'm talking, making sure that your posture is as professional as it can be during this meeting. As we all know, stereotypes are real, and these meetings help us break down those stereotypes even more by just being professional and presenting ourselves as they would expect us to, and as we really should. The piece on virtual backgrounds on Zoom, really important. If you don't have the virtual background option on your Zoom account, please make sure there's blank space behind you or a door that's shut, whatever it is, so there aren't distractions behind you or anything that's maybe a little too personal. Of course, everyone's virtual, so it's normal to, be in your bedroom with the door to your bedroom closed behind you. Totally okay, but just making sure that we're aware of what is behind us, as if you don't have a virtual background, that information will be shared with the camera. In terms of the meeting itself, so Kai was mentioning stay unmuted when you're not talking. I want to foot stomp that, but go even further to say practice muting and unmuting yourself quickly. Make sure that the transitions, while you don't need to be talking over someone, and pauses are okay, make sure you're comfortable unmuting yourself quickly if a question's directed at you, if it's your time to introduce yourself, whatever that is. So every time we don't have to be like, oh, hello, can you hear me? It's Catherine, can you hear me? Try to practice beforehand so that transition is swift. Also, background noises. So if you are unmuted while you're speaking, which of course you have to be, making sure that your cell phone is silenced and that any other background noise that you're aware of. So whether it's making sure that door is shut, making sure that folks in your household know that you are going to be on these meetings, so there isn't a ton of background noise while you are presenting. So, all attention's on you. In terms of transitions from person to person, my rule of thumb is pause is always better than interruption. So if it is, Zoom connectivity in general, I feel like I talk over people all the time. I feel like I talk over people in person. So I try even more so on Zoom to make sure that I'm pausing for that 1, 2, 3 time to make sure that the other person is done with their statement, not saying another sentence, and now it's my turn to jump in. Pausing is okay. We have to all in this virtual space get comfortable with silence. So the next piece is going off of the teamwork. It's really important that we're not correcting each other throughout the meeting. Of course, there are polite ways of doing it, hitting on one of our P's. So if I say something that is entirely wrong, let's say I say the bill number wrong, a polite way of correcting that as your teammate is, hey, Catherine, know that you probably didn't mean to say this, but I think the bill number is blah, 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 instead of, no, that's wrong, or anything like that. So I guess my point is I err on the side of not having to correct someone in general, but if there's a fact that's just flat out wrong, I think there's gentle ways that we can do it as teammates. But if pick your battles, because if there are things that are said that necessarily aren't totally false, going to lead them in the wrong direction, it's okay to let things go. And we shouldn't be, arguing over our legislation or having any confrontation during the call itself. There's graceful ways, of course, to help each other out. If I'm asked a question, I have absolutely no idea what the answer is, I can defer to say, if I'm not the team leader, I can defer to the team leader, or I can defer to the person who spoke of that specific piece of legislation. Whatever it is, kind of make a game plan with everyone beforehand with your team, so everyone knows what part of the conversation they're talking about, but also who should be answering which types of questions. And it always can happen that we just don't know the answer. And like John mentioned, that's totally okay. We have amazing National Center staff who can help us with that in the follow-up phase of the conversation. Now going into a little bit around when you're speaking, it's really important that our tone is as positive and upbeat as possible. It makes people want to hear what you're saying. It makes people interested in what you're saying, and you just come off as more of an engaging person. So I encourage everyone to have as positive of an attitude as possible during these meetings, so we can get our point across, and so we also can be remembered. I think it's really important that we define roles ahead of time. So of course, as we go into those game planning meetings, you know, I'm the team leader, I'm talking about ATA, whatever it is, that we define those ahead of time, and we're not having those side conversations when we're in the waiting room ready to talk to our representatives. So making sure that we're proactive in defining those roles and responsibilities is key. I also think, and I know this is, you know, difficult often, but confidence is key. It will make people listen to what you're saying and also trust what you're saying. And when we're trying to be persuasive, confidence is really important to kind of push our agenda forward and make sure that whatever is coming out of our mouths are being heard and being receptive. So confidence is really important, but to that end, also being concise and clear. So no need to ramble. They are very, very busy people. We are busy people. So making sure that we say what we mean what we say, and then we move on. So not to say be short, but find that balance where your point is driven home, you've shared your personal story at a high level, and then you've moved on. Hitting on the clear piece a little bit more, practice beforehand. Filler words always, you know, okay. It's okay to pause. It's okay to defer to another teammate. But practicing just makes us all look more professional. So making sure we know the issues, we know the numbers, we're confident with what we know we're presenting on, and that we're clear throughout the meeting is going to help them understand these guys know what they're talking about. On to my last piece. Obviously, people that we're speaking to are Republicans, Democrats, Independent, and it's important that we're not going in with that mindset or any judgment calls. We're going in with a bipartisan lens in terms of we're trying to persuade whoever the heck we're talking to at this moment. So regardless of your own personal beliefs or your own views on that politician or whatever bill they voted on last year or whatever it may be, let's try to be as non-judgmental and bipartisan as possible. So we're pushing forward equality for the blind and not rubbing people the wrong way. Often our bills in general, like some may be perceived as partisan, and we need to gently explain that this has bipartisan support. We're really excited, and always feel free to cater. And I know we'll get to this a little bit more in the mock meetings, but feel free to cater to your audience. If we're talking to a Republican representative, emphasizing that this is going to build the economy. If we're talking to a Democrat, maybe emphasizing that it's going to grant opportunities to more people. Whatever it may be, there's really intentional ways that we can professionally and diplomatically address what we want to say. I think that, John, is all I have from a professionalism standpoint, but if you want me to clarify anything, let me know, and thanks for having me. Good luck, everyone.
Catherine, that was fantastic. I appreciate it so much. I've been in a number of meetings, both National Federation of the Blind and other professional settings, and I know Catherine practices what she just described. She's always very professional in the meetings and does all the things that she's described, and it really does make a difference. I want to say it not only, a lot of what we're telling you and discussing right now won't just help you at a advocacy meeting associated with the National Federation of the Blind. This could help you with a job, with education, with everything you do in life. So these are just good presentation principles that help you advocate for yourself in various situations And that's why we wanted to spend a fair amount of time in this meeting building the foundation for a successful presentation. I hope we've done that. We will be doing more. Certainly, there's a little more that will be coming up at the Great Gathering Inn. You won't want to miss that. But right now, let's start to talk about the 4 issues. So we're going to go through and in some fair amount of detail, describe each of the 4 issues so that you're well versed on each of those. So here we'll begin with the Access Technology Affordability Act. And to talk about that is Jeff.
Good afternoon. So many of you are familiar with the Access Technology Affordability Act. If you were at our last Washington seminar, this is one of our issue areas, one of the bills that we presented. So with the Access Technology Affordability Act, the issue at hand is the high cost of access technology. These devices can range anywhere from $1,000 to $6,000. And what we plan to, and what this bill would do, the bill that we propose, would provide a $2,000 tax credit over the course of 3 years. Now, it's a refundable tax credit, and that's important because refundable tax credits mean you don't necessarily have to be employed to access that tax credit. We like the concept of the tax credit as well because it allows the individual to choose what works best for them. You know, everyone has their own goals, careers, and objectives. So we believe that that they should be the ones to choose what path forward they would like. In the past Congress, this bill had gained a large bipartisan support, both in the House and the Senate. In the House, we were able to get 134 co-sponsors. In the Senate, we were able to get 26 co-sponsors. We were very close to getting this bill passed in the last Congress, and we fully intend to do so this Congress, but we need your help during this Washington seminar to push forward, not only to start gain the ground that we left off with last Congress, but to build onto that. Last Congress, we also were able to gain the support of both the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, Chairman Neal, and also the chairman of the Finance Committee, Chairman Grassley, in order to support this bill. Both of those chairmen reside over the Access Technology Affordability Act, and it's very critical to gain their support in order to get the bill passed this Congress. Now, with the flip in the Senate, with Democrats in control, they will have a new chairman for the Finance Committee, and it'll be Chairman Wyden. This year, Chairman Wyden has already co-sponsored the bill, and in the Senate, we currently already have 4 co-sponsors. The bill number will be S212, and in the House, the bill number will be HR 431. And in the House, we've already gained 12 co-sponsors. So we already have gotten off to a great start with this. Like I said, we want to make sure that we push forward with this. So when you're speaking about the bill, make sure that when you talk about your personal story, use the devices that help you in everyday matters, and talk about how expensive they are. Without these devices, state what you would or would not be able to do, so that the staff or the members of Congress or the senators understand why these devices are critical and why this refundable tax credit is so important, so that they're more affordable, so that more blind Americans can obtain them. So we're going to make sure that we keep up the momentum with this bill and keep on pushing it forward, because this is going to help so many people if we get it passed. I know that we're going to get it passed, but we just need to keep it up, and I'll leave it back to John. Or Stephanie, or John.
All right, thanks, Jeff. That was the Access Technology Affordability Act. Now we're going to hear about the Medical Devices Non-Visual Accessibility Act. And here to talk about that, as Jeff said, is Stephanie.
Use that. All righty. Good afternoon, everybody. And Thanks, John. So we're just going to get right into it. So we are going to use the same formula that John has described previously. So let's go ahead and talk about the problem. All right. What is the problem? Advancements in medical device technology are changing the medical landscape for the better. Although this does not include accessibility in the developments and design phases for blind Americans or others with disabilities. With these technological developments comes newer models of home use medical devices, such as glucose monitors and or blood pressure monitors, just to give some examples, which is great. They are more prevalent. However, this currently includes less accessible models, which poses a pressing issue for blind Americans. Emerging technologies such as in-home chemotherapy treatments and dialysis are presently actually being developed without non-visual accessibility in mind. So here's where you talk about your personal story. If you don't have a personal story that you feel is relevant to this issue, feel free to think about things that your family may be at risk for. It could be a little bit more difficult to do that if that's something that you feel would be a little difficult for you. Of course, check in with some members in your affiliate or some blind friends or colleagues and see what issues are super pressing to them when it comes to the accessibility of home use medical devices. Alternatively, you're more than welcome to go ahead and use the story that I'm about to tell you and why this is important to me. So, from December 2015 to June of 2018, my mom courageously fought a battle with 2 different types of cancer. And during her bout with leukemia, she was able to administer medications, inject some medications, and check her blood pressure, put herself on oxygen if need be, different things of that nature. And ultimately, while it doesn't seem like much for some people, it did keep her at home with her family. It kept her from being at risk for other diseases and getting out into the public when she didn't need to be. And ultimately, it had a very positive impact because she didn't have to go to the doctor's office just to get some sort of oxygen or some sort of relief or to take certain medications. So this is definitely important in terms of why they should be accessible for us, considering the developments here. So here's our solution to that. We are proposing the Medical Device Non-Visual Accessibility Act. So once enacted, this bill is going to call on the Food and Drug Administration to develop and enforce a minimum non-visual access standard. Once enacted, the FDA will have 12 months to publish a Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, or an NPRM as we call it in the Advocacy and Policy Department. And basically what that means is they have 12 months to publish a notice that is calling for comments from stakeholder groups that might be affected. That is disability advocacy groups or the manufacturers that may be affected. So 12 months after that NPRM is posted, so that would be 24 months after the bill is enacted, the Food and Drug Administration is going to publish a final rule. And then 12 months after that final rule is posted, and for those of you keeping up with how many months after the bill has been enacted, that would be 36 months or 3 years, manufacturers are going to have to be compliant with the non-visual access standard that the Food and Drug Administration has put into place. Okay, so now that we've actually gone over the issue in great detail, we've told our personal story related to the issue, and we've proposed the solution, the member of Congress or their staff may have some questions. So let's go over some frequently asked questions and how to answer them. So the first question that you might get asked is, or a question that you may get asked is, what does non-visual access even mean? So what I tell people in this instant, and we do have some frequently asked questions online that you are more than welcome to go and reference as well. Some of these are taken from that. Others are questions that have actually been asked about the medical device piece of previous legislation that we've done. And of course, you don't have to memorize the exact answers here, but being able to answer this question competently and in a way that means what you mean when you're currently answering the question. So back to the non-visual accessibility standard. So we define non-visual access as a manner that allows blind or low vision people to access the same information, to engage in the same interactions, and to enjoy the same services offered to other persons without disabilities. So this also means that we would be able to operate the devices with the same privacy and independence and ease of use as people who are sighted. So question 2, aren't there already manufacturers who produce these devices? And if so, how prevalent are they? This one can be kind of a tricky one because some people, sometimes you can say, or individuals will say, no, of course not, which there are some. But what I like to tell people, and this is true, while there are some non-visually accessible devices and options, they're very, very few and far between. And they are, at least from what I understand, unreasonably marked up because of that accessibility component. Even though accessibility, as we all know, doesn't cost very much, little to no money to implement in the first place. Okay, so question 3. What are the risks of medical devices not being accessible to blind Americans? So we know that inaccessibility of these devices can have extremely serious consequences that may include, but are not limited to, accidental overdose and of injecting medications, some unintended overtreatment. Individuals who are blind are more at risk of that. And of course, we don't want to think about this, but death could be an associated risk in some cases, depending on the medication, especially as technology continues to evolve here. So question 4, why is non-visual accessibility important to us as blind Americans? The truth of the matter is the lack of non-visual accessibility prevents blind Americans with conditions such as diabetes, just to give you an example, from being able to monitor their conditions and to be able to care for themselves. So adding that non-visual accessibility component has the help blind people and promote self-sufficiency and keep blind people from having to, for example, live prematurely at government funding facilities, which ultimately saves the government money. We definitely love to talk about that money saving aspect when it comes to the cost of non-visual accessibility, especially because of the stigma surrounding that. So that being said, those are my top 4 questions that I typically get asked. And so I yield the floor back to John.
Wonderful. Thanks, Stephanie. That was terrific. And as she described, we really can't have proper safety and efficacy of home-based medical devices if we don't also have accessibility. This is incredibly important, and I really look forward to hearing about it in the mock meetings. All right, our next issue is the 21st century mobile apps and website accessibility bill. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. All right, so what's the problem? Well, I bet every single member of the National Federation of the Blind has experienced way too many inaccessible mobile apps and websites. I experience probably an accessibility barrier almost every day when it comes to mobile apps and websites, and I bet you do too. The thing is, the law requires these things to be accessible. So what's the problem? The problem is we don't have a strong statutory definition of exactly what accessibility means, and we don't have regulations. All right, so before we get into exactly how we would solve that, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this one incident that happened to me regarding inaccessibility. I remember going to dinner one time in downtown Baltimore. I'd used a popular rideshare app to book my ride to the restaurant. I had dinner with the group. It was later in the evening on the weekend. We stayed late. We sort of broke up, and by the time I got out to the street by myself, the restaurant was closing, and lo and behold, the app had automatically updated over dinner. Only they had made it so that one of the buttons was completely inaccessible, and I was standing out on the street late at night, and not the greatest part of Baltimore, trying to figure out how I was going to get home with this suddenly inaccessible app. All right, so finally I ended up having to hand my cell phone to a stranger. Luckily, they didn't take it. They did help me order it. I got home, but the story could have turned out much worse. So the accessibility is important. What we really need to do is have a culture of accessibility. We need to help educate people that things need to be accessible right out of the box and need to be thoroughly tested. And if we had regulations and other things that help explain that, we think this could dramatically improve accessibility. Our understanding, talking to companies, they understand that the law requires the websites and mobile apps to be accessible, but they feel there aren't clear-cut definitions and regulations. Great, this bill would solve that problem. It would create a clear statutory definition and would authorize the Access Board to create regulations on a very similar schedule to what Stephanie just described for medical devices. After 12 months after enactment, the Access Board would put out a notice of proposed rulemaking. That's a draft rule, a draft regulation. People then can comment on that. Then the Access Board would put out a final rule or regulation. That would be the final instructions for what companies need to do. This is what they want, and this would help everyone. Then companies would have 12 more months to comply with the final rule. So it's the same 12, 12, 12, or 12 months for the NPRM, 24 months for the final rule, 36 months for final compliance. There's a few other things that the bill would do where we're looking for a champion on both the House and the Senate side. We have already some people who have said they're interested. This is very exciting that we can help move this forward, and you'll hear more description of it when we get to the mock meetings. All right, next, our fourth issue. I'm going to go back to Jeff, who's going to talk to you about this, voting, and what we're referring to as the Americans with Disability Voting Rights Act. Here's Jeff.
So with the Americans with Disabilities Voting Rights Act, I'm sure most of you had voted in the past election or in elections previously. And I'm sure that you've encountered many different problems while either going to the polls or trying to vote remotely. The Help America Vote Act, what the problem with many of the voting laws is that they're not up to date and they don't go far enough. The Help America Vote Act was introduced in the early to mid 2000s. And I'll call it HAVA for short. And what HAVA did was it guaranteed in federal elections that each polling location would have one ballot marking device available. Now, the problem with this, with in-person voting and only having one ballot marking device per location, is there's actually a couple of reasons why this is the problem. One, because the device because there's only one device, oftentimes it's not set up. So when you enter a polling location, it won't even be available by the time you get there. And they have to set up the device, which can be very tedious. In addition to that, because only individuals with disabilities use the devices, many poll working staff do not know how to operate these devices. So when you finally get the device up and running, and then they don't even understand, many staff don't even understand how it works. So that's another obstacle that someone with a disability voting has to overcome. In addition to that, when these ballots, when the ballot marking devices print the ballot, it's actually a different size and texture than the other ballots that are being hand marked by other voters. This loses the secrecy of the ballot because you can tell which ballot was marked by a person with disabilities. With remote voting, as some of you may be aware, some of your states may allow electronic delivery or electronic return. With electronic delivery, what that enables is that the state will send you an email, or they may even send it in other ways, but it's typically an email, and you will have to fill out the ballot on your desktop, phone, or laptop, and then you would have to print it out and send it back to the voting authority, whichever the Secretary of State's office or the Board of Elections of your state. The problem with this is, there's two problems with it. One is that it assumes that you have a printer and that you have the capabilities of printing something. As many of you probably learned during the pandemic, it was even hard if you didn't have a printer to find one due to libraries being shut down or schools being shut down. So that's one obstacle many individuals with disabilities have to face if they use electronic delivery. Another one is when you do print out the ballot, you have to sign it. And this can be very problematic because they do tend to match signatures. We don't want anyone's vote to be thrown out because their signature didn't match a previous signature. So what we propose is the Americans with Disabilities Voting Rights Act. And what this would do is we would ensure that not only there are enough ballot marking devices in a polling location, but that we want every voter to use these devices. What that will essentially do is if everyone is using a ballot marking device, it will ensure that all of the paper is printed on the same size and same texture, thereby protecting the secrecy of the ballot. In addition, if every voter is using a ballot marking device, they will have to be operational and set up in order for that polling place to be fully operational so that voters can vote. In addition, poll workers will have to take they will have to understand how the machine works. Thereby, they will ensure that they have the proper training to work those machines. With remote voting, what we would like to do with this bill is ensure electronic return. Now, electronic return is similar to electronic delivery. The only difference is it's with the words. So you return it electronically as well. So you'll have it delivered to you electronically, but then also you'll be able to return it electronically to the Board of Elections or the Secretary of State's office, whichever your state designates. So with that being said, you may get some questions about this. Security questions you may get, how does it exactly work? So states have already, since 2008, many states, I believe it's about 38 states have overseas voters who participate in electronic return. And there hasn't been any cases of fraud or abuse or tampering with the ballots since they started in 2008. In addition to the overseas and military voters using this, 5 states have used this in previous elections, and those states would be North Carolina, Massachusetts, Nevada, West Virginia, and Maine. And each of these states, there hasn't been any case of voting fraud that accompanied electronic return. So regardless if you're in a pandemic or not, it's still much more preferable to be able to return your ballot electronically than it is to have to find a printer if you don't have one, or even having to mail it back in the hopes that it gets sent through the mail. I mean, as many of you have experienced during this holiday season, it is taking quite some time for mail to get delivered from point A to point B. So with electronic return, you don't have to worry about whether it's going to be delivered in time and whether the ballot's going to be counted. All that goes to a side if you had electronic return at your disposal. Like we said, there's very low cases of fraud and abuse with this. So these are the things that we would like to go forward with it. With the ballot marking devices, what is, not everyone will have access to a computer. So that's why it's essential that we do have in-person voting with ballot marking devices. That's why we want to ensure that that's still part of this bill, so that if someone doesn't have access to any electronics that they can vote from home, they're able to go in. And we want to ensure that these polling locations are close and that they're on public mass transit, so that someone can access those polls in order to vote, cast their ballot, cast a secret ballot. Whenever you're thinking of this bill, the two concepts you want to remind yourself of: are you able to vote independently, and are you able to vote with privacy? Those are the two things you want to keep in mind while you're mentioning this, when you're thinking of this bill, talking to your representatives. Again, if you already have states that do have electronic return, you want to mention why this is such a, how helpful it is at your state, and that you would like to ensure that not only you want to make sure that your state can participate in this, but that all states should be able to participate in this electronic return. So we believe that there will be election reform. We're pretty certain there'll be election reform this year in Congress. And we want to make sure that even if this bill isn't the one that we're looking at in particular, that we want the principles of this bill to be incorporated into any major piece of legislation that Congress pushes forward for voting reform. So with that, I'll leave it to John to take it back.
All right, fantastic. Thanks, Jeff. All right, so we're going to go to the mock meeting in a minute, but we've had a few people indicate they have some questions regarding all the different committees. With 4 issues, we have 3 relevant committees in the House and 4 in the Senate. So I'm going to review that a little bit. Now, one of the things we've done that Kyle described earlier is in order to help make your meeting, make sure you have all the backup and background that you would need for your meeting, we have prepared what it amounts to 535 individualized and customized information sheets for every single member of Congress. These information sheets, for example, will indicate if that member of Congress is the chair of one of the 7 relevant committees that we're dealing with. Ranking member, ranking means you're the top person in the minority party on one of the 7 committees, or simply a member of one of the 7 committees. And if you aren't, then we simply don't identify it. So if you see a blank, that means they're not chair, ranking, or member of one of the relevant committees. That still doesn't mean they're still very important. Everyone's important. They all have a vote. But we'd like you to particularly pay attention to the chair and ranking and members of the relevant committees. Kyle's going to remind you about those in a second, but let's say you visited Frank Pallone, New Jersey. It would say Chair, Energy and Commerce Committee, and Medical Devices, and the website, because House Energy and Commerce is the committee that has jurisdiction over those 2 issues. If you happen to visit Kathy McMorris Rogers from Washington State, it would say ranking member. She's ranking on energy and commerce, and would also flag the fact that that is important to medical device and websites. If you maybe visited Representative Schakowsky from Illinois, she happens to be a member. She also spoke at our national convention, but she's a member of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, and it would simply flag her as a member. Same with, say, John Sarbanes here in Maryland. If you went to J.M.A. Raskin, he's not a member of that committee, so it wouldn't flag him at all with regard to that issue. So this helps you then know that you might want to spend a little extra time in your meeting talking about the issues that they have particular influence on. So that's partly why we flagged it, especially when you're talking to a chair or ranking member. You'll want to spend more of the time in the meeting, more time on that area, because this is an area where that person, that member of Congress, has extra ability to focus on that issue. So it's helpful to remember, I know this is a lot, but it's helpful to remember these 7 committees. As I said, they're going to be flagged on the person by person information sheets, but I'm going to have Kyle now review those 7 committees so that you'll be sort of have those in your head of particular importance.
All right, thanks, John. I'm going to try and get through this quickly so we can get to the fun stuff, the mock meeting. So for the Access Technology Affordability Act, the relevant committee in the House is the Ways and Means Committee, and the Committee of Jurisdiction in the Senate is the Finance Committee. For the Medical Device Non-Visual Accessibility Act, the Committee of Jurisdiction in the House is the Energy and Commerce Committee, and the Committee of Jurisdiction in the Senate is the HELP Committee, or the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. For the 21st Century Mobile Apps and Website Accessibility Act, the Committee of Jurisdiction in the House is, again, the Energy and Commerce Committee, the same as the Medical Device Act. And in the Senate, the Committee of Jurisdiction is the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee. And for the Americans with Disabilities Voting Rights Act, the Committee of Jurisdiction in the House is the House Committee on House Administration. And in the Senate, it is the Senate Committee on Rules and Administration. So that's that.
All right, thanks, Kyle. All right, now we want to go to our first of 2 mock meetings. So what we've done has been giving you sort of behind the scenes description of how you'd want to cover the issue. You'll want to probably say some of the things that we've said, but a lot of times you want to address the issue a little bit differently, as if you were literally talking to the member of Congress or a member of their staff. So it's helpful to think about, well, how exactly would I present these issues in that situation? So that's where we do a mock or practice meeting. So this is where we're pretending to do an actual presentation to a member of Congress. In this case, I'm going to play the role of a member of Congress, and I'm going to turn it over to our first team leader, our distinguished member of our national board, Carla McQuillan, to lead this first meeting.
Thank you, John. All right. Senator Perret, it is so good to see you again.
Thank you.
So we're with the National Federation of the Blind, as you know, and the National Federation of the Blind knows that blindness is not the characteristic that defines us or our future. Every day we raise expectations because low expectations create obstacles between blind people and our dreams. We can live the lives we want, and blindness is not what holds us back. So again, thank you for meeting with us today. I am here with several of my colleagues, Amy and Sean and Terry, and we're each going to present a different legislative priority that we have in the National Federation of the Blind. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is the Access Technology Affordability Act. So we brought this here to the Congress in past years, but this is a really important issue for us. So here's the story. If you and I both go to the store and pick up a $1,000 laptop computer, okay, you can open that up and you can use it as is. Me, because I'm blind, as are the rest of the members of this delegation coming to visit with you today, I have to spend an estimated $1,000 to $6,000 additional dollars just to be able to access the information that is on that computer. And of course, with 61% or so of blind people being unemployed or underemployed, this makes it a very high price tag for those of us who are looking to be employed. So here's our solution. The Access Technology Affordability Act would allow blind individuals to purchase their much needed accessible technology for up to $2,000 in a refundable tax credit over a period of 3 years. And this would not take money out of our government, but instead it would allow blind people to go to work because they could access their job listings online and they can do their jobs from their homes. As we know, many people with COVID are working from their homes. So if you are interested in supporting us on this, as I'm sure you are, sir, it is Senate Bill 212, and you can contact Senator Ben Cardin's office and sign on. So, Senator Perret, can we count on your support on this?
Yes, you made a very compelling case, and I think I'll co-sponsor that bill.
Oh, that would be awesome. Thank you so much. We appreciate that. And now I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Amy, to talk about our next issue.
Good afternoon, Senator Perret. My name is Amy Rule, and I wanted to talk with you today about something that's very important to me personally and to many blind people. We are struggling right now because access to medical devices, home use medical devices, is really restricted for many of us. And we have introduced the Medical Devices Non-Visual Accessibility Act to try to address this issue. I happen to be a diabetic, and when I was first diagnosed, I had tremendous difficulty finding a meter that would be recommended that I could use because the vast majority of things like glucose meters, blood pressure monitors, and home kits for conducting chemotherapy or home dialysis are not accessible to blind people. They require the use of vision to interact with them and to use them successfully. And when I started to look for glucose meters and was looking for a glucose meter that my doctor recommended, I couldn't obtain it because I really couldn't use that particular brand. There are very few accessible meters on the market, and those that are very old technology, and they don't offer the same services and connectivity options, and they frankly are often not even as accurate as some of the more modern technology that's available. And this can compromise our safety, our ability to be independent, and our capacity to live as long as possible in our own homes. So that's the problem we're currently facing. Increasingly, because the technology is advancing so rapidly, it's impossible for current legislation to keep up with the many developments. And this is readily achievable. Apple, for example, has created all of their products to be accessible right out of the box. The iPhone that I have in my hand is totally accessible, and I can use it just as you can. I can set it up myself. I can install all the apps that we commonly would use, and that is totally accessible and at no greater cost to me than to you. Other examples of accessible devices are ATMs. Most ATMs now are totally accessible in this country. And also, there are accessible voting machines in every precinct in the country. So this is readily achievable. So to address this issue, what we'd like to do and what we hope you will support is the Medical Device Non-Visual Accessibility Act. What this would do is it would require the FDA to develop a notice of rulemaking within 12 months from the date that the act is adopted by contacting stakeholders and manufacturers and working to develop minimum standards. Within 12 months of that proposed rulemaking notice, we would ask that the excuse me, we would ask that the final ruling would be delineated, and within 12 months of that all manufacturers of medical device equipment used in the home would need to comply with the standards that are stipulated, just as they would for any other medical device criterion. So, in conclusion, the goal here is to give us the access that we need to ensure that we can live independently, that we can take charge of our own health care, and that we can use these devices to prolong our lives and prolong our ability to live in our communities. So I hope that you will support this and join us in the effort to make healthcare more accessible to the blind. Thank you for your time.
Caps lock on. Caps lock. Task switching. Zoom. Chats, channels, and group. Jump to contact. Recent chats. Zoom webinar. View button. Meeting information. Turn off or select the microphone on YouTube button. Mute. Currently unmuted. All day button. Zoom.
All right, you also have another issue?
Yes. Good afternoon, Senator. My name is Sean Calloway. And Senator, as you well know, by law, most websites, or really all websites and mobile apps should be accessible for all. And unfortunately, this is not the case. In fact, this is why we have presented the 21st Century Mobile Apps and Website Accessibility Act, sort of to assist us in making sure that all blind people have inclusion and accessibility to websites and mobile apps. Senator, I'm a sort of a transplant from Tampa, and as you well know, last night I watched a wonderful Super Bowl, and of course Tampa Bay came out victorious. Well, this morning, actually, sir, I went to purchase some Super Bowl merchandise off a couple of websites who were advertising that they were selling Tampa Bay championship T-shirts. Unfortunately, I could not purchase these T-shirts because the websites were not accessible. I was unable to make these purchases. Also, Senator, you know, I'm a proud parent of a beautiful 6-year-old daughter. And oftentimes I encounter parents at my daughter's school who want to provide me with resources to help me with my daughter's learning experience. Unfortunately, when I receive these resources, the websites are not accessible. The mobile apps are not accessible as well. And I cannot participate fully in a learning and educational experience with my daughter based on the resources given to me by different parents from the school. Now, most companies, Senator, will tell you that you know, they want to comply and you know, make all websites and their mobile apps accessible, but they just really don't know how. So we're proposing that regulations are created to assist these companies in ensuring that these websites are accessible and these mobile apps are accessible for blind people. And we're asking for the assistance from the assistance of the U.S. Access Board to assist with proposing these regulations by first a 36-month process. The first 12 months, of course, dealing with a notice of a proposed rulemaking. And within 24 months, we will anticipate a final ruling based on the notice. And lastly, after 36 months, we will anticipate compliance from many companies who need to be compliant in regards to rolling out these websites and mobile apps to our society. Now, Senator, one of the caveats of this particular bill that we're proposing, we're asking for enforcement of these website regulations, website and mobile apps regulations. We're proposing enforcement through the Department of Justice, so they can address this through our government entities and also through companies and different organizations, and also through the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So for employers to have their websites and mobile apps accessible to all of us as well. So, Senator, we're really asking you to assist us in really promoting and really signing on to this bill, which is very important to blind people. Is more importantly to all Americans in the sense of inclusiveness and making sure we have the same access to information, no matter what level of society we're talking about. If it's sports, academics, education, businesses, you name it. It's all about inclusivity. So thank you, Senator, for taking the time out to listen to us today.
Sure.
Thanks, Sean. Terry, you want to go next?
Yes, absolutely. Hi, everybody. Greetings, Senator Perret. Thank you so much for having us here today. I want to tell you a little story. You have some facts there in front of you, so I'm not going to go into all the details and numbers of the facts in regards to the Americans with Disabilities Voting Rights Act. What I want to do is tell you a story about a little girl who came to the United States with her family and was fascinated by American history. She always dreamt of being able to cast her independent vote when she turned 18. Then she realized that because she was not an American citizen, she wouldn't have the opportunity to vote. Fortunately, her parents took all the classes they needed and became naturalized citizens just before her 18th birthday. Unfortunately, this little girl still didn't think she could cast an independent vote by herself because she was blind. That little girl was me, and it wasn't until 2008 when I was finally able to cast my own private and independent vote because of the Help America Vote Act, which was enacted in the early 2000s. Since 2008, I have not been able to cast a private and independent vote successfully until the 2020 elections. This is because the state of Nevada was one of the few states that provided a digital ballot system so that during the pandemic, I could access a digital ballot marking system, the same digital ballot marking system that has been available to our overseas military servicemen and women, like my brother, who has served tours in Afghanistan and South Korea. So this digital ballot marking system that's available to our servicemen and women has been made available to a few people in a few states and should be made available to all Americans with disabilities so that they can access a safe, private, and independent vote. The Help America Vote Act states that at every polling location, there should be one accessible machine. However, getting to that polling location during the pandemic made it not safe for many of us. But outside of the pandemic, it also meant once we got to that location, that machine might not be up and running. The poll workers might not even know how to turn on or set up the machine. And we would be left sitting around waiting hours sometimes to be able to make a cast a vote. If that machine was working, then the ballots that came out of the machine were often a different size, or the paper is different texture, taking away the privacy of our vote. So what we're asking you to do is to support the Americans with Disabilities Voting Rights Act so that all Americans with disabilities have access to a safe, private, and independent vote.
Thanks, Terry. And thanks again, Senator, for taking the time to meet with us today. And we look forward to your support on these issues.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you, Carla, Amy, Sean, and Terry. I'm going to provide just a couple of quick comments, and then we'll go to the next meeting. One, I want to comment on what a good job they did with, I'll call it time management. They went through, as we talked about, broadly describing the problem, giving a good personal example in each case. Really, I think moving and many very moving examples. This is exactly what you want to do. And then talking about exactly how the problem needs to be solved through federal legislation and describing exactly what the federal legislation would do. If you, in the first case, which was done, I just want to keep emphasizing. So on the Access Technology Affordability Act, there is a bill in the House and the Senate. So that one you can very specifically ask that the person co-sponsor the bill. So that is S-212 in the Senate and HR 431 in the House. If people were to ask you, is this the same as the bill last year? The answer is virtually yes. Yes, it's all the basic same. The set terms and conditions are all the same. And so we have very specific legislation. On the other three issues, they might ask you, okay, well, is there introduced legislation? And the answer is no. We're looking for a champion, but we're actually talking to several people. So using the term champion is good. I would not ask them to sponsor the bill because we have several that we're in conversations with. So asking for someone who wants to be a champion, if they say, yes, I think I would like to be a champion, fantastic. Be sure to let us know. I couldn't help but smile when Sean described not being able to get Tampa Bay Buccaneers paraphernalia. I'm sure that made a few people smile. There's probably a number of people who weren't all that sympathetic to that. But anyway, I still thought that was a good story, Sean, and certainly thought bringing it home to the family was terrific. So, and it was your personal story. So all those were good stories. Compliment you on the time management. I want to also compliment that I really think I felt that it was a polite and professional presentation of the issues, and that Carla noticed she was fairly persistent trying to say, well, where's your position on this? That's but in a very polite way. I thought that was terrific. All right, so terrific job, and let's go see. All right, so that helps really give you an idea of what the actual meeting will potentially feel. I did not try to ask a lot of detailed questions. The best way to prepare for that, I mean, we don't really have time on that for today, but is to review the FAQs that we have for all four issues on the website, so that if you're asked certain questions, you're prepared. And remember, if you don't have the answer, say that you'll be more than happy to research it and get back to them. All right, so let's try this again. Let's try another group. Every group's a little bit different. And for this one, we're going to have Gary Wonder lead this group with Gary and Carlton and Chancey and Raul. All right, so over to you, Gary.
Okay, so am I supposed to have video here or no?
It would be wonderful if you did as an example, but if you don't, no problem.
Okay, so it says that I can't, so I guess I won't. Which
right.
blows my opening line, which is I'm not great at camera focus, but I'm really focused on this idea that we can visit the Capitol and speak with people who exercise the levers of power here. We've got 4 issues to talk with you about. We'll be really quick about it, and we'll hope that in our quickness, you'll ask questions if we go too fast. Our first issue we're going to talk about is our friend Carlton Walker is going to speak about the Affordable Technology Accessibility Act. Carlton?
Thank you, my friend Gary. Without the video, y'all can't tell that you might have thought it was going to be a man coming on, but nope, it's Carlton Walker, Carlton and Cook Walker. Hi. Thank you so much for having us in your office today. I am excited to talk to you about the Access Technology Affordability Act. Just so you'll know a little bit about me, you can tell from my accent, I'm not from Pennsylvania. I moved up here from North Carolina and fell in love with the man in the state. We were blessed to have a little girl a few years into our marriage. And a few years later, we found out that she's legally blind. So, all right. We thought we could handle it, but we were in a really small district in Fulton County, you know, the second smallest county in the state. Small and poor school district, and didn't have a whole lot of things to help them out. They didn't have the kind of funding needed. And we didn't have the kind of funding needed. So as each year, the other students got more and more technology and got better and better, got more access to laptops and iPads, and I got less and less. It was really sad because Anna loved being in class, and Anna's smart as a whip. Sometimes a little bit of devil, but you know, that's how smart kids sometimes are. But Anna started feeling like less and less of a person. That's not something any child deserves. Having this act passed would have helped us. We probably could have gotten Anna some better equipment sooner if we could have had that. And it ended up that we moved to a larger area with better funded schools, and Anna had more equipment available, and things were good. Anna started writing and started loving school again, and Anna fell completely in love with chemistry. Physics was fun, math was fun, but chemistry was the bomb. And Anna's love of chemistry continued through high school and into some community college classes. Except what Anna looked forward to the most, the chemistry lab, ended up being the most isolating part of the class because the lab didn't have accessible equipment. Anna was able to be the stenographer because the technology she had access to that we did get for her, the refreshable braille display and screen reader software. Think of the refreshable braille display as kind of like our computer monitors. It's really hard to work on a computer if you can't see what you're writing. It's really hard for anybody. And that's what the refreshable braille displays are so great for. But with the lab equipment, Anna didn't have that. Anna couldn't read the lab equipment, couldn't do the labs, couldn't take the measurements. However, we got really lucky. And Anna's chemistry teacher saw Anna's love of chemistry and got a grant for a specialized piece of equipment called the Accessible Lab Quest. It changed everything. With the Accessible Lab Quest, Anna was not only a participant in all the labs, she was a leader. And she wasn't just the leader for her own lab group. She was the leader for the entire chemistry lab class because with the Accessible Lab Quest, Anna could shine. The great thing about this Accessible Lab Quest is that the sighted kids could use it too. It was a great piece of technology everybody could use, but it's several $1,000s. If it weren't for that grant, Anna would not have had that good chemistry experience. If it weren't for moving to a bigger school district, Anna wouldn't have gotten the screen reader software and the refreshable braille display she needed. Part of our moving to that big school district was when I became a teacher of blind students. In that capacity, I had the amazing honor of seeing what access technology could do for children. Children with significant disabilities blossomed when they could see a picture or feel some words or shapes. It was amazing. And not only did they blossom, so did their educators, so did their families. Human capital is something that we can never replace. With the Access Technology Affordability Act, we can get more technology into the hands of people at younger ages or individuals who lose vision at older ages. We can make it more financially accessible to have the technology be accessible. This is a refundable tax credit, but it is spread out over 3 years. It will help people achieve to their abilities and give back to their communities. Would really appreciate your willingness to support and possibly even co-sponsor the Access Technology Affordable Act. Thank you. Gary?
Yes. Senator, I want to talk with you about something that is as important as life and death. I want to talk with you about the Medical Device Non-Visual Accessibility Act. You know, home use equipment is becoming ever more prevalent. We're trying to keep people out of hospitals. We're trying to keep people out of nursing homes. So if we can send them home and cut down on transportation, that's great. So we're all in favor of this fantastic digital technology that helps us. But as it becomes more prevalent for sighted people, it becomes more inaccessible or unusable for blind people. Lots of blind folks are diabetics, and something as simple as a glucose meter is difficult to get at. Something that lets you continuously monitor your glucose so that you don't have to do finger sticks all the time is a device that I just got. And when I bought it, I found out that the reader for it does not talk. It's only because it has some Bluetooth capability that will communicate with my Apple iPhone that the unit works at all. So hats off to Apple for the fact that I don't have to take all of these finger sticks. We've done some home health care with my wife's mother, and we had to regulate her oxygen, and she had an oxygen level of anywhere from 2 to 6, but we had to guess at where we were on that scale from 2 to 6 with our own markings. This is not good. We've got situations where people can't get insulin pumps, something that would be tremendously helpful because they can't adjust them. And this field is expanding. We're talking about treatments for chemotherapy and dialysis that are going to involve homebound equipment. Now, if we don't have this stuff, we either stay in the hospital longer than we need to, which has its own problems with cost and disease, or we end up getting into situations where we go to nursing homes, not because we're invalids, but because we can't do the basic reading of equipment. So we think that this is unacceptable. We think that we can do something about it. And what we would like to do is have the FDA do a study, do a contact with all of its stakeholders. We'll give them about a year to do that. We'll give them about a year to come up with a rule. We'll give a comment period, but we would hope that within 36 months after you pass this act, that we will actually have true accessibility. Again, this issue is not just a matter of convenience, it's a matter of health, and there is nothing more important than health. we are looking for champions for this bill, whether sponsors, co-sponsors. We need your help. I don't know if you have questions, but I'd sure love to get an affirmative response no matter what questions you have.
You've
Can you
made a
help?
very compelling case. I'm very interested. I think we'll have the staff to continue to do some due diligence, but put me down as a champion.
Well, I think it builds you up, sir, and I appreciate it very much. I'm going to turn the floor over to my friend Chancey, who will talk with you next.
Hi, thank you so much for taking the time to see us today. So my name's Chancey. I'm in Brooklyn, and I am a library-based technology educator. I coordinate accessible technology education for people with disabilities in New York. So I want to talk to you about a piece of proposed legislation that's really close to my heart, which is the 21st Century Mobile Apps and Website Accessibility Act. So basically, I'm sure you already know this, but we already have federal legislation, including Section 508 of the VR Act and a few other things that stipulates that websites do have to be accessible by law. But we don't really have clear regulations spelling out what accessibility means. So from the perspective of a business or a retailer, or even someone at the place where I work who's thinking about procuring things that are accessible, it might not be totally clear what accessibility means. And so we don't always know when we're complying with accessibility requirements under the law. We know that websites and mobile applications are a huge part of our lives. I don't think I really have to sell you on that. But what I can tell you is that for people who are blind or have print reading disabilities or have low vision, the continual friction of encountering inaccessible websites just slows people down. It's demoralizing. It makes people learn slower. It's a barrier between people and their education. It keeps people unemployed. And I just can't overestimate the collective harm that's done when mobile apps and websites continue to be inaccessible. But that's not where the collective harm stops. We've also seen, back in 2010, the Department of Justice issued a notice of proposed rulemaking that was supposed to address and create regulations for website accessibility. That proposed rulemaking hasn't been worked on since 2010. And so what we've seen is this phenomenon of click-buy lawsuits where attorneys with all different sets of intentions and motivations have kind of taken advantage of all the gray areas and the crisis to increasingly litigate. And litigation keeps people from working together. Litigation is really costly. It's bad for the economy, just like creating inaccessible websites that keep people from consuming products or services or being employed or being educated. It's all bad for the economy. So we want to do something that creates meaningful accessibility across the web and across the mobile web, and gives businesses and potential procurers a way to avoid litigation by really understanding what accessibility means. So this bill would direct the Access Board to draft accessibility regulations. They would have 12 months to do that after the legislation is passed. And that would provide plenty of time for public comment, plenty of time for input from consumer groups and businesses. And then after that 12 months, the Access Board would be empowered to go ahead and promulgate standards that strive to harmonize with Section 508 standards. So strive with current existing law. There's a little bit of precedent for this. So the Access Board did draft some standards in early 2017, and those established guidelines for website and technology accessibility. So it wouldn't be a heavy lift. These regulations could be promulgated by the Access Board and would harmonize with those earlier guidelines and harmonize with 508. This act would also empower the Department of Justice to investigate the accessibility of websites and mobile applications, either on its own or when a complaint gets raised. And that would give us a flow to take action, civil action when necessary, if a business, knowing the regulations, willfully continues to build technology that's not accessible. I know you don't use a screen reader, you don't probably use any assistive technology. I don't know if anyone in your family does. And I will tell you that when sighted people come into my library branch, they often say, oh, it's amazing that technology can do that. It can read the websites to you. Oh, that must be so difficult. And anything that you see that's unfamiliar is amazing to you. But what I want to assure you is that we've had regulations or not regulations, but guidelines that are well understood in the developer community literally for decades. And the problem is that development teams don't always educate themselves on guidelines and best practices or what the law says. Folks coming up in coding boot camps and CS schools don't get this information. And we really need a stronger, more obvious frame so that all those folks who are doing development and design can be kind of compelled and steered to do the right thing. Because until that happens, there's going to be kind of a piecemeal approach to correcting accessibility, and correcting it after the fact. In addition to creating the collective harms that I mentioned, it also is like way more expensive than building accessibility in the first place. So I want to assure you that what the Access Board would propose in terms of regulation would be readily achievable, and I think would be really welcome clarity for the development and business community. And I'd be so happy to answer any questions that you have.
All right, I don't think I have any questions.
How does that land with you? What do you think?
I will, I think I'm going to have my staff look at this a little bit longer, but I am very interested in what you said and the problem, and sounds like you have thought up a good solution.
All right, thank you.
Okay, well, Senator, we know that you won by a landslide in your election, but that doesn't happen in every election. And one of the things that our friend Raul is very passionate about is voting rights for blind people. And we'd like to talk with you about some legislation that we think should be passed.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you, Senator, for meeting with us. We know that these days are very challenging. I'm going to paint could be a very blunt and ugly picture. So as my friend Gary said here, you are here because of votes. That's how everybody is here in Congress. So we have here to present for you the Americans with Disabilities Voting Rights Act. Now, first, this ugly picture. The voting system that is currently used is not fully accessible to blind people. And by that, I mean the various different methods, such as the voting machines, such as paper ballots, absentee ballots, etc., are not accessible in many different ways. For starters, if someone chooses to vote in person, even though there are accessible, or there are supposed to be accessible voting machines at every polling place because of the Help America Vote Act, many times these machines are either inoperable or they haven't been tested, and maybe they're not even set up. And in the cases where they're not set up, in many cases in that situation, the poll workers themselves have no idea how to use these machines. And so it creates a barrier for a blind person to vote independently. In addition, many of these machines will produce the output in paper form that is easily identifiable that a blind person has voted. And so there is no secret voting. If we talk about electronic voting, we have two systems. We have electronic delivery and electronic return methods for voting. The delivery method basically means that we can vote electronically by receiving the information, but then we have to print it out. And if we have to print it out, that's not accessible. We cannot vote independently. If the ballot is returned in the mail, there could be problems with signatures, there could be problems with it getting lost. We all know how the mail system has worked of late, and so we wouldn't want to rely on that. Now, if we have electronic return methods that could be made accessible, that that would ensure the voting process that is used by many people overseas can be accessible to people who are blind. There have been surveys done, and I won't go into all the numbers just because we have them, we've given those to you there. Feel free to take a look at those. But one that I would like to draw your attention to is that in the 2020 election, there were over 40 states that offered the electronic delivery systems, but they were not accessible. So we would ask that you help support this bill, which is going to ensure several things. First and foremost, that voting is accessible to everyone who is blind or low vision. This is going to be done in several ways, and it would be that all forms for absentee voting are accessible. There would be an electronic return system that is accessible. And by the way, I believe that only 4 states have used that recently. It would also ensure that the machines that are in the in-person polling places are going to be accessible, working, and available, and that they will produce a ballot that will not be identifiable as a ballot that was cast by a blind voter. In addition, we are including a request for that so that all poll workers receive proper education on the operation and troubleshooting of these machines, so that the voting process, when done in person, can be very smooth and stress-free. So we would like you to champion this for us. What are your thoughts, sir?
I'm very interested. I'm very concerned about making sure that everyone has the right to a private and independent vote. So I'll be happy to have my staff look at this, and we can let you know.
Thank you very much.
Senator, we appreciate this very much. You know, you have the fact sheets, and at the end of every fact sheet, there is information about how to get a hold of our folks who work on these issues, and you have emails from each of us. So please do follow up, and we thank you so much for your time and what we hope will be your enthusiastic support.
Thank you. All right, so then I'm going to talk a little bit about this meeting. I think it went, again, another very good meeting, another set of good personal stories. You can see how everyone has their own individual stories, and they can all be very powerful. The weaving of the overall problem as it affects all blind Americans, combined with then weaving in the personal story. I think each one of them did a really nice job with that. And then transitioning in and explaining how the solution is federal legislation, and how the legislation, giving an outline of what the legislation would do, and then describing therefore how that would solve the problem. I think the group did a nice job, and maybe I should have mentioned this with the first one. You know, it's good to think of this a little bit as a radio broadcast, that you hand it off to the other folks. So when you finish speaking, if you wanted, say, to go back to Gary, the group leader, you saying, Gary, back to you. If you're trying to elicit something from a member of Congress or staff, to ask them sort of directly by name, so that folks know who sort of is supposed to be speaking. They did a great job, never stepping on each other by having 2 people speak at once. But I think by having these sort of clear handoffs about who at least on our team thinks they're going to speak next or should speak next, helps make sure that they're minimize any pauses. So consider that these affirmative handoffs from one person to the next. This can also be, we weren't so much practicing the questions. That can be particularly tricky. A lot of times the best way to handle questions would be to say that the meeting leader will either answer the question or hand it off. So in this case, where it was Gary Gary might, if I asked a question about voting, Gary may answer it if he just feels he has a good, quick answer. But he also might say, well, Raul, why don't you take that question? And that's then the clear handoff. And then when Raul's finished, he could say either back to you and then continuing the Q&A portion. But always having these handoffs, I think, will help us keep a good, clean transition and minimize pauses and also minimize people stepping on each other. You might occasionally, if you're think it's necessary, ask an open-ended question about, does anyone else have anything further to say? And then you'll just have to kind of moderate that. I don't know if I have any other comments. I thought that those two meetings went very well. All right, so we're about to conclude the initial training that we're offering today. We really appreciate that you were here. I hope that you've learned some about the 4 Ps to kind of summarize: being polite, professional, persuasive, and persistent, the importance of etiquette that Catherine reviewed, the 4 issues and the details that we talked about that, all of the logistics that Kyle reviewed, of which there's many. If you have questions regarding those, please email Kyle at kwalls, KWALLS @nfb.org. And then with the 2 mock meetings, thanks for the folks who participated in that. They did a fantastic job. All right, now the main event is still coming up. So please, it's the same information, and please come back promptly at 5 p.m. Eastern time for the great gathering in. Until then, have a great rest of this afternoon.